Well, I can ask you, the question of whether the daily death of Ukrainians, whether the poisoning of other figures in the opposition, such as the Skripal poisoning in Great Britain, moved the needle. And the answer is no. We all know what Russia is capable of. There was never any doubt that in this way or another, but the Russian regime is, of course, responsible for Alexei Navalny's death. Whether by just starving him,
Right.
holding him is inhuman conditions, and so on. And many people thought that that's actually what brought to the collapse of his organism, or intentionally poisoning him, like they did already one time in the past. Whereas there are no secrets, there is no secret that the Russian regime is capable of, this behavior and many similar behaviors, in the past. The big question is whether the person who is actually responsible right now for the decision making in the White House is hearing that, is seeing that, and is he impressed by the amount of evil that his friend in Kremlin is capable of doing?
That is the big question. I agree with you on that. And of course, Navalny obviously. The series of poisonings, his choice to come back and face the music in Russia. So many questions around, how he decided to act and what was done to him. But in this moment, yes, Russia's acting threatened by NATO and Greenland. How do you describe the status of President Trump and Putin? Is it a working relationship?
Well, we see that President Trump, although he is threatening Russia with sanctions for quite some time, basically since the beginning of his term, but he is in no hurry to translate his threats into real actions. And for now, there is slightly more pressure on countries, with secondary sanctions, countries that buy Russian oil, and so on. But again, this is not the volume of sanctions that could be laid on Russia if perhaps, the president of the US would, embrace a less lenient approach to that issue. It's clear that, what we see right now from Washington, that it seems that it's easier for them to try to pressure Ukraine rather than, Russia. And there are also a lot of programs and projects that are being discussed right now. And this is according to the Wall Street Journal publications from about a month ago about the future of oil trade and some land corridors also with Alaska, and so on. So there are some, there is some vision in regards to U.S.-Russia future of relations. For now, currently, it seems like a stalemate. President Trump is unable to really move the needle on what is happening on the battlefield in Ukraine. He's unable to bring to the long-term ceasefire. And it's been a year right now, more than a year of, these efforts. I'm sure that he will continue trying that, but with the given arsenal, of what he wants to do and what he can do, it seems that we are not progressing much on that issue.
A lot of questions around where the pressure is. You mentioned correctly, the White House has chosen seemingly to, apply more pressure to Ukraine at this point. Russia has, by many accounts, dealt with this issue well, internalizing their economy, reorganizing things, able to mobilize the military, apparently, at least to keep this going. Does the status quo, benefit President Putin at this point? In other words, is he, okay for the time being with the way things are?
Well, I would not say that Russia is doing really okay. With the current pressure. That is, the internal pressure and also the external pressure. For example, we do not see any foreign investments in Russian economy. The Russians talked much about BRICS, about having this alternative to the US dollar, relying more on Asian countries and so on. But in the end of the day, what we see, it's not investments. We see the Chinese and to some degree also Indians until recently buying Russian oil with a huge discount to the degree that, there are questions, that are being frozen in Moscow, is it worthwhile even, because the discount was so immense. The Russian economy is actually, living right now in quite a terrible condition, and it's inflation, of course, and the rise of costs and problems with the, employment and so on. The worst is yet to come, and the sanctions, they never backed immediately. We know it from also from the Iranian experience and North Korean and so on. But in the end of the day, it takes toll, and it's quite a serious toll on Russian economics. It's definitely not evolving. It's not even keeping with the status quo. The status quo, it's a dream of went during the pipes in 2023 or so. But the last 2 years, it's been a survival. So the conditions on the ground are really not good. Nevertheless, Putin is more interested in continuation of the war, in my assessment, than in ending it. It has more. He definitely has more to earn from this wartime economy, and also keeping his country on high alert and so on, than from ending the war and then being faced with questions: why did we even need it?